Welcome to today's Streamlined RootsMagic webinar. My name is Michael Booth, and I am Vice President of RootsMagic and one of its developers. And also with us this evening is the Roots Magician himself, Bruce Busby. And Bruce, of course, is the President of RootsMagic and its author. Now, RootsMagic 6 is the newest version of our award-winning genealogy and family tree software, which makes family history easy. And tonight, we'll look at the newly enhanced timeline view. We'll see how the Timeline View's new Live Edit panel makes this one of the most powerful editing features ever. You can now make corrections to your data while viewing it in the context of other family members' life events. Have we whet your appetite yet? Well, with that introduction, I'll turn the time over to Bruce.
Hey, thanks for joining us. Okay, this is a feature that we actually initially added in RootsMagic 5. Okay, and that's the timeline view. But in version 6, what we've done is we've kind of taken it the next step. I'm going to kind of lead into this. Right now, or in version 5 and previous, if you had a person, you could open up an edit screen that looked similar to this, where you would have some basic information about the person, and then you'd have a list of all of their events. Well, the way you would edit those people is you would click on a particular fact, and then you could just come over here and edit that. Okay. Well, we then added a feature called the timeline view. And what the timeline view was it gave you the ability to see not only that person's events, like their birth, census, graduation, marriage, occupations, things like that, but it also showed the events of their family members, the immediate family members, their father, their mother, their siblings, their spouses, and their children. So what we did is we gave you the ability to do that. Well, then we realized, hey, this would actually be very powerful if we made this editable. And so what we did is over here on the right, we added an editing screen. Okay, so we basically took the concept of the edit screen and added that right into the timeline view. So as I select birth, I could come right over here and edit the birth information just like I do from the edit screen. So in version 5 on the timeline view, if I wanted to edit the person's birth from this timeline view, I needed to double click. And I can still do that. And so if I do double click on a fact, it will bring me up to that person's edit screen and put me editing that fact that I just clicked on. Okay, so that is still there, but we've made it much easier to actually edit the person from right here. So let me give you a brief overview of how the timeline view itself works before we get into the editing. Okay. Now, there are a number of options, and you can go up here and click on options, and you can select these options, and we'll cover those in just a little bit. At the top of your timeline view, you have a graphical timeline, and there's two rows. Well, there's three rows. There's the row of the years. The top row is the person. These represent the events in this selected person's life. Family, those little blue items, those indicate the events in the family member's life. Now you'll also notice that there's this little blue, light blue highlighted area that corresponds to whatever's highlighted in my timeline. So if I highlight the birth, that is the person's birth. That's what that little red dot is. If I go down to birth of sibling, that's what the little blue dot is. Okay, as I mentioned, blue are the family members. If I go on down, census, there's the census. There's the birth of a sibling. There's another census. Here's a graduation. Here's an engagement. Here's a marriage. Here's a residence. Now, a residence in this case happens to be a range from 1928 to 1942. That's why you see the little highlighting more than just a little bar. It's actually highlighting the entire range of that residence. Occupation. Okay, there's the occupation. So the occupation is that red line in between there and there. Okay, the father's death, the residence. Okay, so you can see that as you move through this timeline, that it's going to highlight the area in that graphical timeline that corresponds to the actual items. Okay, now one of the things we did add new to this timeline in version 6 is this top section. And this basically, the name of the person, their spouses, and their parents, and if there's more than one set of parents, you'll have more than one row. These were added because these actually allow you to edit the person's names and the spouse and the parent information right from this timeline, just like you can from the edit screen. Okay, now let's go ahead and look at some of the options. Now if I go into the options, one of the things I can do is turn that graphic timeline off. So if I actually want more room for just the facts, I can say don't show that graphic timeline, and it turns that graphic timeline off. Now I am going to actually leave it off for the remainder of this presentation because I'm at a lower resolution here for the webinar software, and I want to be able to show you as much screen as I can with this particular timeline view. So that's going to be turned off. You can go back in on your own system and turn that on anytime you'd like. Okay, one thing I did need to point out, you'll notice that some of these events are bold: birth, census, graduation, engagement. Okay, those are bold because they are the events in this person's life. The italicized events are going to be the events for family members: the birth of a sibling, the birth of another sibling, the death of a father, and the death of a mother. Okay, anything that happened to the person's spouse or children or parents or siblings that happened within this person's lifetime will be shown, and will be shown in italics. Okay, you'll notice that it doesn't have, we get questions, it's not showing the birth of his parents. Well, that's because that was before he was born. So events in their lives before his birth or after his death are not going to be shown in his timeline. What we're trying to do is show you his life in context with the family members. Okay, now there's some other things that we have going on here as well. You'll notice that the columns we have the person's age at each of these particular facts or events. Now some of them, retirement in this case, doesn't have an age, and that's because there's no date entered for the retirement. If I happen to know the date he retired, RootsMagic would be able to calculate an age for that. But if I don't have a date, that's why you may not see the age. The other place you won't see an age is for things that happened after his death, such as his burial. Those will not show an age for that as well. Okay, again, you have the list of facts, the date, the details. Now the details usually is something like the person's name, the sibling's name that was born, the father's name who died, and so on. But it may also have something to do with the actual description for that fact. For an example, the occupation, if he was a physician, it may show that as well. And that's something you can edit over here on the side just as easily as the date or the place. Okay, the next column is the place. And there's several options that you have when it comes to the place. Right now, it is showing the city, county, state, country, and so on. It's not showing the place details. Now, there may be place details for some of these places. If I were to go up into the options, I can choose to show the place details. And if I do that and click OK, you'll notice now street addresses are now showing because those have been entered as place details. So those are options that you can turn on or off. Another option that's available for the place is to reverse the place. So instead of city, county, state, country, RootsMagic would display it as state, county, city. Now, why would you want to do that? Let me go ahead and kind of give you an example. If I reverse the place names, if I go into those options and reverse the place names, what that's going to do is that's going to group them geographically. So as I go down through my list, I'm seeing Iowa, 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 Utah, Iowa, Iowa, Iowa. this can be a good tool to spot places that you may have incorrect or that may indicate that a particular person is not necessarily the correct person. Okay, so use that as a tool to be able to spot that. Now, if I wanted to see more about Floridel, in other words, right here, I can see that she died in Utah, in Ogden. I could come over here and look at that. But if I wanted to see more information about Floridel, I can just double click on this, and it's going to open up her edit screen. Of course, it will go into edit mode for that death fact, but I do have the ability to look at the other events within her life and see the other things that pertain to her. I can go in and look at her to-do lists and her, her media album and research logs and all of that type of thing as well, just by double-clicking. Okay, this is really nice because I don't have to go in and out switching from person to person's edit screen. I can see all of this from right here. Okay, now let's say I want to look at somebody else's timeline. Okay, for example, I'm looking at Dr. James Smith's timeline, and I want to see his, let's say I want to see his father's timeline, Howard Smith Jr. Well, that's what the little person's head is, and you can see when I hover over the little face, it's going to tell me you can switch to this person. So if I click, I'm going to go from Dr. James Smith to Howard Smith. Okay, I am now on Howard Smith's timeline, and again, I can see all the information about his birth, the birth and death of siblings, birth of spouse, death of his mother. I can see that his mother passed away at age 4. That's something that I normally would not easily be able to spot just by looking at his edit screen, because on his edit screen, I'm not going to see the death of his mother. I'm only going to see his basic information. Okay, and that's what I mean by being able to see the context of him within his family's life. Okay, now if I want to, I jump to his, if I want to go back to Howard Smith, or excuse me, back to Dr. James Smith, I just can go up on the menu or on the toolbar, and I can click the back, and it will actually jump to the wrong person there. Okay, I've been going to some wrong people there. Let me go back to the home person here. I'm going to go back to the home person, Dr. James Smith. Okay, I've been kind of wandering around through this database in a kind of a random order. If you want to see what order that back button takes you to, what you can do is open up this side list and look at the history. That's where you're going to see that. And so that's what the back button is actually going to. It's going back to previous people in that history list. Okay, so you can see that's the order that it's going through. Okay, let's go ahead and close that. Okay, now in addition to the dates and places and so on, you'll see there's actually columns right here for some other information, notes, sources, and media. Okay, now if there happens to be a note or source or media, there'll be a little check mark. So I can tell just by looking right here that there is a note and at least one source for his birth. If I hover over the note, you'll see it's going to kind of give me a little bit of a heads up on what the note says. Now I can click to actually edit that note. Okay, I do not have to go into his edit screen and then highlight the birth and then go in and edit the note. I can edit his note right here from this screen. I can do the same thing with sources. When I hover, I can see he has one source. It's a journal. I can see here's one source for the census record. I can see here's a source for a marriage. I can see that there's a source for this. Now, if there's multiple sources, you will see them all listed. And again, if I click on the little check mark, I would be able to access, in this case, the birth sources right from the timeline view. Okay. The last one is going to be media. If there are any media items, I can click and open up the media album for that person, and I can go in and access those media items. And finally, there's actually a column here, and this column only affects the events, the facts. It's not going to be available up in here, but this is for shared events. Okay, so if I go down here it's asking me, do I want to share this event? And I can click. So if I wanted to share this birth with other people that are in the RootsMagic file, I can do that just by clicking right there. It's going to open up the shared facts screen, and I can go select other people to share this fact with. Now, what is a shared fact? This class is not really about shared facts, but I'll give you a brief overview of it. We do actually have another webinar which talks about facts and goes into detail on what shared facts are. But sharing a fact means I can share this fact with other people in the file. So I can go in and say, well, this is his birth. This is Dr. James Smith's birth. But I want to share this fact with this other person who was the doctor who delivered him as a child. Okay, this is really useful for things like the census. Okay, if I go into and add a census to the head of the household, I can then go share that census fact with that person's spouse and say she was also in this census, and I can share it with the children. Maybe they have 10 children. I can share it with the 5 children who were listed in that census. So by entering one fact, I can go share that fact with all those other people who were listed in the census with him. Now, the reason that that's great is because if I find I made a mistake with this, or I find that I want to add a scanned image, I only have to do it in one place. I just do it to this fact, and it will apply to this same fact in everybody else's screen. So you can see right here, when I look at this census fact, it says that it's shared with one other person. And that other person it's shared with is Deborah Lynn Roberts as a spouse. So if I were to go into Deborah Lynn, into Deborah Lynn Roberts, here she is. I'm going to go over to hers. When I go over to hers, see that same census fact is right here, and that's what that little green symbol means, is that I didn't add this census to her. I added it to Dr. James Smith and then shared it with her. And if I go and make changes, if I look at this and say, oh, man, this was actually the 1930 census, I can come over here and change this to the 1930 census, and you can see it changed right here. When I go back to his screen, you'll see that that census record has been modified. Okay, I can modify a shared event from the screen of anybody that it's shared with. I do not have to come to Dr. James Smith and edit it for him. If I see that something is wrong, whether it's the date, the place, the notes, the sources, the media, anything that I modify on another person's screen will affect everybody that that event is shared with. In other words, that event is a single event that all of those people are sharing. Okay, and that's what this column is for, is showing you if there are any shared events, and if there aren't any, you can go in and click and you can share that event. So like I say, the best places that I use the shared event is for a census, where I add it to the head of the household and then share it with the wife and kids, or with a residence. Residence, I can add the street address and all the residence information to the head of the household and then share it with all the people who lived in that household. You know, whether that's a spouse, whether that's children, whether that's a nephew or a cousin that maybe is living with them. I can share that residence event with all of those people. Other places that the shared event can be handy is for things like a marriage. I can share this marriage with other people and say, this person was involved in this marriage as the best man, or as the maid of honor, or as the person who performed the ceremony. You know, so you can use it as a witness feature. In other words, adding witnesses to that event, or for people who happen to be in that census or in that residence. Okay, now that basically is going to cover this. So let's go ahead and talk about a number of different things here. When I want to edit, I am not limited to editing just the events. Okay, if you remember, when I've opened up the person's edit screen, all I can edit are Dr. James Smith's facts. So if I edit birth, census, graduation, whatever, I can only edit his events from here. If I wanted to edit his spouse's information or his children's information or his parents' information, I would have to close his screen, go select that other person, from the pedigree view or the family view or whatever, and then go into their edit screen and then edit that. What's great about this timeline view is if I highlight birth, I'm editing Dr. James Smith's birth. If I click on the birth of a sibling, I'm editing Flora's. Right here, I'm editing hers. I'm editing his census. I'm editing his sister's birth. I'm editing his father's death right there. I'm editing his mother's death. So I can edit multiple people's information right from this same screen without having to go into a separate edit screen, highlight the fact, and edit that, save it. I can do everything from right here. Okay, now there are a couple of other things we've added up here as well. Add a fact and delete a fact. So if I want to add a fact to Dr. James Smith, I can come up and say I want to add a fact, select the fact type right from here, and I can add other facts to Dr. James Smith. If I want to delete a fact, if I wanted to delete this census record, I could say delete it, and it's going to ask me, do I want to delete this? If I do, it's going to be removed. Now, the add fact only affects Dr. James Smith. Okay, in other words, if I say add a fact, I select the fact type and add it, it is going to add that fact to Dr. James Smith. The delete fact, though, will work with whatever's highlighted. So if I'm highlighting his sibling's birth, when I click delete fact, this will actually delete the birth of his sibling. Okay, and it's going to delete the birth of that sibling from the sibling himself or herself. It's not just removing it from Dr. James Smith's view, it's actually removing it from Sylvia Smith. So be careful. It's a very powerful tool to be able to delete incorrect information from another person's timeline. But like I say, just be careful that you're not going in and deleting. So don't assume that deleting this birth of a sibling is just removing it from Dr. James Smith's, but that Sylvia's birth is still in. When you do this, it really is going to delete that. That's why it gives you that error, that warning message when you click that to tell you, hey, this is going to be removed from Sylvia Smith. Okay, now I want to show you something that's really cool, and it's really nice now that you're able to go ahead and edit multiple people right from this one screen. It makes it a very, very powerful editing tool. But what I'm going to show you is a feature that we've actually been asked to be able to do for years, basically since the first days of RootsMagic and even before that with our previous program, and that is the ability to have two edit screens open at the same time. Okay, so, oops, wrong button. So for example, if I was going to edit Dr. James Smith, if I double click, I open up his edit screen, and let's go ahead and kind of shrink it down a little bit. Okay, if I want to edit somebody else, if I want to have Howard Smith editable at the same time, you'll notice I can't do that because as soon as I click, it basically gives me that annoying Windows boinging telling me, hey, you've already got a screen open. You've got this thing, it's called a modal screen, means you've got a screen open and you cannot, you can't actually open another one until you close this. Okay, and so it doesn't matter whether I have two databases open at the same time. So for example, if I go in and I open up another database, I'm going to open up another database over here. These look like the same database, but they're not. Sample 2 and Sample 3. They have basically the same data, but they are different files. So if I were to open up Dr. James Smith over here, if I tried to open up Dr. James Smith over on this other screen, again, I can't. It doesn't matter that there's two screens open because I have this other dialog popped up. Okay, this is where this timeline editable view becomes really powerful. Now, it's going to be hard to see this on this low resolution. On your monitor, you'll actually be able to see more. But I'm going to go ahead and switch to the timeline view for Dr. James Smith. And then I'm going to do the same thing over here. Okay, so now let me go into the options over here and turn off that graphic timeline. Okay, right now I have two edit screens open at the same time. Okay, by being able to have this timeline view as an editable view, it is not a pop-up screen. So I am able to go ahead and have this. So I can come over here and I can look at Dr. James Smith's birth here, and I can look at Dr. James Smith's birth here. I can actually go in and let's say I want to look at, I'm going to go to his father. I'm going to go to his father in each of these. Okay, and so if I go and look at, let's go ahead and I'm going to scroll down because I preset this up. If I go and look at his death over here, and I look at his death over here, okay, I can open up that same person, and I can actually see, oh look, in this file I have the death date for him, but I don't in the other one. And so instead of having to go open up his edit screen, go into the death, copy and paste it, whatever, I can just come over here and I can copy it, and then I can go over here and I can paste it. Okay, so I can actually be using the two different editing screens at the same time. Okay, now I see a question here, and what I'm going to do is I am going to go ahead and answer this because it was right exactly what I was going to show you next. And that question is, what I was showing you was opening up two different databases and being able to open up an edit screen in each of those databases by using this timeline view. The question is, can you open up two different edit screens in the same file doing this? And the answer is yes. Right now I have sample 2. That's the file I have open. So I'm going to go up to File, and I'm going to go down here to Open, and I am going to open the exact same file. Okay, so now I have, let's see, Howard Smith Jr. I guess that didn't really matter. If it's the same person, it's the same person. Right now, I actually have two edit screens open within the same file. Okay, because when I open up files side by side like this, it doesn't matter if they're different files or if they're the same file. I can actually go ahead and do that. Okay, so this can be useful if I want to look at a different person. If I want to come over here and compare information from one person to another person. For example, maybe I have a database that I've imported, I've accidentally imported a GEDCOM and have some duplicate information. If I want to compare those two records that are different records, but they're in the same file, I can now do that. I can actually open up the two different screens in the same database at the same time. Okay, so let's see if there's what other questions we happen to have. Okay, how would we add a person living in the same residence that's not related to anyone on the tree? Okay, that happens to be a shared events question, but that's actually a good question, and we can show you that really quickly. If I wanted to, if I was doing residence, and let's go to somebody that had a residence. I think Dr. James Smith, is he the one that had a residence? Yeah, he has a residence. I can go in here and I can say share the event. Okay, now there's two things that I can do. One, if I have a housekeeper and they're not related to anybody in the tree, one thing I could do is go up to the add menu, say add individual, and I could add them into the database, but just not link them to anybody. Okay, that's one way to do it. And then when I would go in to say add a person, I could actually go pick that person that I had added that's not linked to anybody, and I could let them share that fact. But if you don't want to actually enter that other person into the database, what you can do is when you say add a person, there's two options. Choose a person from the database or just type the name of the person. Okay, and if I do that, when I add somebody to share an event, I have two options. This person is in my file or this person's not in my file. So if this person is not in my file, what I can do is I can come and I can put Hazel. Okay, and I don't, you can tell that I'm kind of old because I remember that TV show called Hazel. I don't remember what her last name was, so I could just leave that blank and click OK. And so now I have Hazel. Now, she's probably not a witness, so I would probably want to go in and actually create a new role type, and that role name could be housekeeper. And I could create a sentence template for the role. That's a whole other webinar that's going to be coming up. Housekeeper. And so now I've added another person that shares this fact, Hazel, who is the housekeeper. Okay, and Hazel, it's showing me that there's one person sharing this, and when I bring it up, I can see Hazel. But if I go and edit, she's not in my file. So I can either select people that are in my file, or I can select people that aren't in my file. Okay, is that note going to if I add a note to a somebody actually came up with the name, so apparently let's go ahead and fix that one up. Okay, we got that. Okay, the next question is on the shared events is if you have a shared event and you have a note, is that note going to show up for everybody that event is shared with? The answer to that is yes. If I have this resonance fact, I can add a note right here that would be shared with all of those people. Okay, and actually this will be a better example right here. This one right here, because it doesn't matter to show, you can't really show a note with somebody that's not even in your database. But if I were to add a note, you'll see right here, if I go in and put this is a note for a shared event, okay, and save that, I now have that. Okay, now that person that it's shared with, Deborah Lynn Roberts, okay, if I want to go to Deborah Lynn Roberts, where is she? She's right here. There's that census event that's shared with her, and you'll see there's the note. And if I click on it, there it is. This is a note for a shared event. So if I add notes, you know, and I can go back in here, I just added another sentence, okay, and I save that note, and I go back to Dr. James Smith and go back to his census. If I look at it right there, when I go look at his note, there it is. I just added another sentence. So that's what I'm saying. Anything I do on this event, whether it's from the person I added the event to originally or somebody I shared it with, it is going to take effect for everybody. That event is shared with that. Okay. Let's see. Is the timeline view the only way to have two databases open to compare and paste, copy and paste facts? It's not the only way. I can actually open up more than one view. I can go and I can open up another view, another database side by side, and it doesn't matter. I can have whichever whichever one I want right here. Now, the one thing about the timeline, the advantage the timeline gives you is it's the one that's going to let you actually have two different edit fields open at the same time. You know, if you're on the pedigree or the family, in order to actually get into that person's information, you do have to double click, open up their edit screen, and once you've done that, that's closed. So I would have to come in here and copy information here, close it, go back to the other person, open their screen, and go where I want and paste it. So the timeline view is the only way I'm going to be able to just copy and paste it without opening that edit screen up and opening, closing. But you can use the side-by-side views and look at people. You just can't do that copy and paste without opening up the edit screens. You can drag and drop people. So, for example, if Ruth Ann Mills was a child over here, I could click and drag her over here, and then it'll say, who do I want to copy? And I could add her as a child. I'm not going to do that because that'll screw this database up pretty good. But it is possible to do that. We do have another webinar on working with multiple databases. You know, so I recommend you take a look at that one. Okay. Question about can that be done? The sharing, opening up multiple screens can be done in any of the versions of RootsMagic. The timeline view, editing two of them at the same time, that is only going to work in RootsMagic 6. I have a question here about that they have RootsMagic 6, but they don't have this back button on their toolbar. Okay, all you have to do to add that is you customize the screen. I'll do it quickly because it seems like I do this in almost every webinar we do, is show how to customize the toolbar. Just right-click, choose Customize, and then select the Commands tab. Choose which category these match up to those menu items, File, Edit, List. Go to the Search, and you'll see the back button right there, and you can just click and drag that up to the toolbar. Okay, I've already got it there, but if I wanted to, I'd just click and drag it up to the toolbar and put it wherever I want it to go on the toolbar. Let it go, and it will add that back button to the toolbar. So that's how you add a back button or any other button to the toolbar as well. Okay, let's see what other questions we have here. Let's see, are we ever going to be able to print this timeline? Okay, that's actually a good question. There's not a way to print this exact timeline, but there is an option to print the timeline report. And what you can do on that, I'll show you how to do that. We are looking at letting you be able to print this actual timeline, but for now, what you'll do is go into the report, select, let's see, what is it under? It's under timeline list, timeline chronology list. Tell it to create that report, and there's two different ones, and the one you want is this individual timeline list. And what that does is that it's actually a little bit more powerful than this on-screen timeline, because you can choose exactly which other people to include in that timeline list. It's going to by default use, in this case, Howard Smith Sr., but I can choose whether to include other people. And right here, this is where I choose those people. By default, the RootsMagic timeline view only includes the immediate family members: dad, mom, brothers and sisters, spouses, and children. Okay. On the individual timeline list, I can include those same people. Let me select them. I can go in and highlight Howard Smith. Oops. And why is it not? I can pick Howard Smith Jr., and then I can mark, and I can say families. And so I can pick, all of his families, and then I can pick any other people I want as well, select that, and then choose whatever options I want, and then generate the report. And so here is that timeline chart, has the age, has the date, and has the actual event. It will include your sources as well, so your sources will be in there included as an option if you want. Okay, like I say, this particular view is not currently printable, but that is something that we are working on. Okay, let's see. Looks like a lot of votes for including the being able to print the timeline view from there. So we'll move that up a little bit on the to-do list, because it would be nice to be able to do that. Okay, well, it looks like most of these other questions I'm seeing are kind of copies of the other one. Yeah, it looks like most of these are kind of copies of the other one. So hopefully you've been able to see what a powerful tool this timeline editing is. One, it's just being able to see your person or this particular person in context with all their family members, but being able to actually go and edit all of that information right from that one screen, and being able to edit multiple people at the same time, whether it's in the same database or another database. Anyways, hopefully you've enjoyed this webinar, and we have a couple more coming up. So go to rootsmagic.com/webinars. There's a list of the ones that are there, and again, you can see any of the webinars that we've already done will have been recorded, and you can view those there as well. So again, thanks for joining us.